Rain pelted against the windows of the transport shuttle as it descended toward Aurelia Prime. Tom Bradley pressed his face against the cold glass and watched the capital city grow larger beneath them. Towering spires of crystal and metal stretched toward the purple sky, each one taller than any building on Earth. Somewhere down there waited the job that would either save his daughter's life or get him killed. The other passengers kept their distance from him. Word traveled fast in the imperial bureaucracy, and everyone knew about the dragon. The creature that had killed 3 professional tamers and sent a dozen more to the hospital. The beast that made hardened soldiers weep with terror. Tom looked down at his worn work boots and wondered what kind of fool took a job like this. But Amy needed the money. Her medical bills grew higher each month, and the treatments on Earth weren't working anymore. The experimental therapy on Aurelia Prime cost more than Tom made in 5 years, but the Imperial contract paid enough to cover it all, if he survived. The shuttle landed with a soft thud at the government complex. Tom grabbed his single duffel bag and followed the flow of passengers toward the exit. A thin alien with purple skin and too many eyes waited for him at the gate, holding a data pad that glowed with his name. Tom Bradley? The alien's voice sounded like wind through broken glass. I am Director Vell. You are here about the Dragon contract. Tom nodded. That's me. Director Vell looked him up and down with all 6 eyes. Tom knew what the alien saw. A middle-aged human with calloused hands and gray in his brown hair. Clothes that had been washed too many times. The kind of man who fixed things for a living and had never seen a dragon in his life. The Emperor will not be pleased, Vell muttered, but he gestured for Tom to follow. Come. We must complete the paperwork before you change your mind. They walked through corridors filled with beings from 100 different worlds. Tom had seen aliens before, but never so many in one place. Some floated instead of walking. Others had tentacles where arms should be. A few looked almost human, except for their silver skin or extra limbs. All of them stared at Tom with expressions he couldn't read. The contract office smelled like ozone and fear. Behind a massive desk sat a creature that looked like a cross. Between a bear and a lizard, its claws clicked against the desktop as it reviewed Tom's file. Says here you're a maintenance engineer, the creature rumbled. No experience with dangerous animals, no military training with alien species, no psychic abilities. Each statement landed like a hammer blow. Why do you want this job, human? Tom thought about Amy lying in her hospital bed back on Earth. About the doctors who shook their heads and talked about experimental treatments they couldn't afford. About the nights he sat beside her bed, listening to her struggle to breathe. I need the money, he said simply. The bear lizard laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Honest, at least. Most applicants lie about their qualifications. It pushed a thick stack of papers across the desk. Sign here, here, and here. The medical release is on page 12. Next of kin notification on page 18. Tom signed without reading. He had learned not to think too hard about the risks. Amy's face kept him focused on what mattered. Director Vell led him through more corridors, deeper into the complex. The walls here were thicker, made of some kind of metal Tom didn't recognize. Warning signs in a dozen languages covered every surface. Emergency weapon lockers sat every 50 feet, their red lights blinking like angry eyes. The Void Serpent has been here for 8 months, Vell explained as they walked. Before the injury, it was the Emperor's most prized companion. They fought together in the War of the 7 Suns. The creature saved the Emperor's life 14 times. What happened to it? Vell's steps slowed. Battle of Kronos Station. The Emperor was leading a desperate charge against the rebel fleet. His ship took a direct hit. The dragon threw itself in front of the blast to protect him. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. The explosion blinded it and left scars across half its body. Worse, the psychic feedback from the Emperor's pain. Drive it mad. They stopped in front of a massive door marked with symbols that hurt Tom's eyes to look at. Through the reinforced window, he could see into a circular chamber the size of a basketball court. Energy barriers divided the space into sections and monitoring equipment lined the walls. The Emperor brought it here hoping to heal it, Vel continued, but the creature attacks anything that enters its space. It screams with such psychic force that most beings cannot remain conscious in its presence. 3 Tamers have died. 12 more suffered permanent mental damage. Tom peered through the window. At first, he saw only shadows and twisted metal where the dragon had destroyed the furniture they tried to give it. Then something moved in the far corner, and his breath caught. The void serpent was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its body stretched 30 feet from nose to tail, covered in scales that had once been crystal clear, but now showed deep cracks like broken glass. Where its eyes should have been, empty sockets wept a glowing fluid that pooled on the floor beneath. Scars crisscrossed its hide, and one wing hung at an awkward angle. As Tom watched, the dragon lifted its massive head and turned toward the window. It couldn't see him, but somehow it knew he was there. Its mouth opened in what must have been a roar, though the soundproof walls kept the noise out. The psychic scream hit Tom like a physical blow, making his teeth ache and his vision blur. But he didn't run. "When do I start?" he asked. Director Vel stared at him with all 6 eyes. "You felt that, didn't you? The psychic attack?" "Yes." "And you still want to proceed?" Tom thought about Amy again, about her smile when he read her stories at night, about the way she never complained, even when the treatments made her sick, about how she still dreamed of flying among the stars someday. "I have a daughter," he said. "She's 8 years old and she's dying. This job pays enough to save her life." He looked back at the dragon, still roaring silently in its prison. "That creature in there is somebody's family too. Maybe it just needs someone who understands what it's like to protect the people you love." Vel made a note on his data pad. "Very well. You start tomorrow morning. I suggest you spend tonight writing any final messages to your family." Tom nodded and shouldered his duffel bag. As they walked back toward the exit, he could feel the dragon's presence behind him like heat from a fire. Tomorrow he would face the creature that had broken every expert sent to help it. But tonight, he would call Amy and tell her that everything was going to be okay. The smell hit Tom first. Ozone and something else. Something sharp and metallic that made his nose burn. He stood outside the dragon's chamber at 6 in the morning, holding a thermos of coffee and Amy's favorite storybook. The overnight security guard looked at him like he was walking into his own grave. "Last guy lasted 12 minutes, the guard said. He was human, probably from one of the outer colonies based on his accent. The one before that managed 15, but only because he was unconscious for most of it." Tom unscrewed the thermos cap and took a sip of coffee. It was terrible, synthesized stuff from the facility's food machines, but it was hot and familiar. "What's the record?" 43 minutes. A Zalarian mind mage tried to force a psychic link with the creature. The guard shuddered. "We found him in a coma. Still hasn't woken up." Through the observation window, Tom could see Kairos coiled in the center of the chamber. The dragon's breathing was rapid and shallow, and the glowing tears that leaked from its empty eye sockets had formed puddles around its head. Even with the psychic dampeners running at full power, Tom could feel the creature's pain pressing against his mind like a headache. "Open it up," he said. The guard's hand hesitated over the controls. "You sure about this?" "No, but do it anyway." The energy barrier flickered and died. Immediately, the dragon's head snapped toward the entrance, and Tom felt the full force of its psychic scream slam into him. It was like being hit by a truck made of pure agony. His vision went white, and his knees buckled. But he didn't run. Instead, Tom sat down heavily on the floor just outside the chamber's entrance. The concrete was cold and hard against his back as he leaned against the wall. His hands shook as he opened the thermos again and took another sip of coffee. Kairos thrashed and roared, its massive body slamming against the reinforced walls. The sound was deafening even through Tom's ringing ears. Monitoring alarms began to wail as the dragon's stress levels spiked off the charts. Tom ignored it all and opened Amy's book. The little star who lost her way had been her favorite since she was 5. The pages were worn soft from countless readings, and Tom knew every word by heart. Once upon a time, he began, his voice barely audible over the dragon's rage, there was a little star who lived at the very edge of the galaxy. The psychic assault intensified. Tom felt like his skull was being split open with a hammer. Blood ran from his nose, and his vision blurred. But Amy had endured worse than this during her treatments. She had never given up, never stopped fighting. Neither would he. The little star was very lonely, Tom continued, turning the page with trembling fingers. All the other stars lived closer to the center of the galaxy, where they could shine together and keep each other warm. Hour after hour, Tom sat and read. When he finished one story, he started another. When his throat grew too dry to speak, he sipped coffee and listened to the dragon's anguished cries. Slowly, he began to notice patterns in Kairos's behavior. The creature's rage wasn't random. It peaked whenever the automated food delivery system activated, when the medical scanners swept across its body, when the ventilation system changed the air in the chamber. All the things the facility staff did to keep it alive seemed to make it angrier. Tom thought about Amy during her worst days in the hospital. How she hated the constant prodding and testing. How she flinched whenever a new doctor walked into her room. How she only calmed down when Tom held her hand and told her everything would be okay. "You don't like all the machines, do you?" he said to the dragon during a brief lull in its thrashing. "They remind you of bad things." Kairos went still. For a moment, the psychic pressure eased and Tom could think clearly. The dragon's massive head turned toward him, empty sockets seeming to stare in his direction. "I know about pain," Tom continued, his voice stronger now. "My daughter is sick, really sick. Sometimes the doctors have to hurt her to help her, and she doesn't understand why." He closed the book and set it aside. "I think maybe you don't understand either." The dragon made a sound unlike any of its previous roars. This one was quieter, more like a whimper. The psychic pressure shifted from rage to something more complex. Tom felt echoes of grief and confusion mixed with the pain. The Emperor left. "You hear?" Tom said. "You saved his life, and then when you got hurt, he brought you to this place and never came back." The words seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him, truths he hadn't known he understood. "You think he doesn't love you anymore because you can't fight for him." Kairos collapsed to the floor, its great body shaking. The tears from its eye sockets flowed faster, and the psychic emanations changed again. Now Tom felt what could only be described as heartbreak. Loss so profound it had turned into fury because fury was easier to bear than grief. Tom stood up slowly, his legs cramping from sitting on the concrete for hours. The dragon didn't react as he took a step forward. Then another. The psychic dampeners weren't working anymore, but somehow the creature's mental assault had stopped. "I lost someone too," Tom said, moving closer to the energy barrier that separated them. "My wife, Amy's mother. She got sick, and the doctors tried everything, but nothing worked." His voice cracked. "Amy asks me sometimes why Mommy had to go away. I never know what to tell her." Kairos lifted its head, and for a moment Tom could have sworn the eyeless creature was looking directly at him. "But you know what I figured out," Tom continued. "Love doesn't go away just because someone can't be with you anymore. The Emperor didn't abandon you because you got hurt. He brought you here because he was trying to save you. Maybe he doesn't. Know how to face you now?" But that doesn't mean he stopped caring. The dragon made that whimpering sound again, and Tom felt a new emotion through their psychic connection. Hope, fragile as a soap bubble, but real. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen showed Amy's latest school picture, her gap-toothed smile bright despite the dark circles under her eyes from her treatments. "This is Amy," he said, holding the phone where Kairos could sense it. "She's the reason I'm here, the reason I won't give up on you." He pressed his hand against the energy barrier, feeling it tingle against his palm. Sometimes the people we love need us to be strong for them, even when we're broken too. Kairos slowly dragged itself across the floor until its massive head was just inches from the barrier. Tom could feel the creature's breath, hot and humid, fogging the energy field between them. "Tomorrow I'll come back," Tom promised. "And the day after that, for as long as it takes." As he walked toward the exit, Tom heard something he hadn't expected. The dragon wasn't roaring or thrashing anymore. Instead, it made a sound almost like purring, deep and rumbling and somehow peaceful. The security guard was waiting for him, with wide eyes and a medical scanner. "Sir, you were in there for 6 hours. How are you still conscious?" Tom looked back through the observation window. Kairos had curled up in the center of the chamber, its breathing slow and steady. The pools of glowing tears around its head had stopped growing. "Sometimes," Tom said, "understanding is better than medicine." 2 weeks into the job, Tom had established a routine. Every morning at 6, he would arrive at the facility with fresh coffee and whatever book Amy had recommended during their nightly video calls. He would sit just outside Kairos's chamber and read aloud while the dragon listened from the other side of the energy barrier. The change in the creature was remarkable. Where once there had been constant roaring and thrashing, now there were periods of calm. Kairos would coil itself near the barrier when Tom arrived, its massive head resting on the floor close to where he sat. The tears from its empty eye sockets still flowed, but slower now, more like gentle rain than the torrents of grief they had been before. Director Vell visited every few days, checking the monitoring data with barely concealed amazement. The dragon's stress hormones had dropped to levels not seen since its arrival. Its appetite had returned, and it had stopped the self-destructive behaviors that had worried the medical staff. "The Emperor has been asking for reports," Vell said, during one of his visits. Tom was taking a break between stories, sharing his lunch with Kairos by pushing apple slices through the barrier's lower edge. The dragon would carefully take each piece in its massive jaws and eat it slowly, as if savoring the simple kindness. "What do you tell him?" Vell's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "That the creature is responding to treatment. He asks if it will be ready for active duty soon." Tom felt a familiar tightness in his chest. "And what do you say to that?" "I tell him we must be patient. But he grows restless." Vell paused, watching as Kairos gently nudged Tom's hand with its snout through the barrier. The Emperor loved this creature once. They were bonded in ways most beings cannot understand. But seeing it broken, helpless, it reminds him of his own mortality. That evening, Tom's video call with Amy lasted longer than usual. She was having a good day, which meant the treatments weren't making her too sick to talk. Her face was pale and thin, but her eyes still sparkled with curiosity. "Tell me more about the dragon, Daddy," she said from her hospital bed. The room behind her was filled with get-well cards from her classmates and the stuffed animals Tom had sent over the months. "Well, today Kairos let me touch its head through the barrier," Tom said, smiling at the memory. "Its scales are warm, like stones that have been sitting in the sun." "Does it have a name?" "Kairos. It means the right moment in an old Earth language." Amy nodded seriously, the way she did when she was thinking hard about something. "Is it sad?" Tom considered lying, giving her a simple answer that wouldn't worry her. But Amy had always been able to see through his attempts to protect her from difficult truths. "Yes, sweetheart. It's very sad. It misses someone who used to take care of it. Like how I miss Mommy? The question hit Tom harder than any of Kairos's psychic attacks. Yes, exactly like that. Amy was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of her blanket. Maybe you could show it my picture. Sometimes when I'm really sad, looking at pictures of people I love makes me feel better. The next morning, Tom brought his phone loaded with photos of Amy, pictures from her birthday parties, school plays, and quiet moments at home. As he sat beside the barrier, he held the phone where Kairos could sense it through their growing psychic connection. "This is Amy building a sandcastle last summer," he said, scrolling through the images. "She insisted on making it big enough for dragons to live in." Kairos made its rumbling purr sound, and Tom felt a warm pressure in his mind. The dragon was trying to understand the concept of family, of love that existed across distance and time. And this is her first day of school. She was so nervous, but she didn't want me to walk her to class because she said she was brave enough to do it alone. The psychic connection between them had grown stronger each day. Tom was beginning to understand the dragon's emotions without words, and Kairos seemed to comprehend his thoughts in return. It was like learning a new language made of feelings instead of sounds. "She wants to meet you," Tom said, showing a video of Amy waving at the camera. "I told her about you, and she drew you a picture." He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. Amy's drawing showed a stick figure man standing next to a purple dragon with crystal scales. Both figures were smiling, and there were stars scattered across the background. At the bottom, in Amy's careful handwriting, were the words, "For Kairos, my daddy's friend." The dragon's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Its psychic emanation flooded Tom's mind with such intense emotion that he had to grip the floor to keep from falling over. Joy, gratitude, and something that felt like love mixed together in a wave that left him gasping. Kairos pressed its head against the barrier, and Tom placed his palm on the opposite side. Through the energy field, he could feel the creature's pulse, strong and steady. For the first time since he had started working with the dragon, its tears stopped flowing. "You want to protect her too, don't you?" Tom whispered. The dragon's response came not as thoughts but as images flooding Tom's mind. Amy flying through space on Kairos's back, both of them laughing. The dragon curled around Amy's hospital bed, keeping her warm and safe. Scenes of family and belonging that made Tom's heart ache with their impossible beauty. "Maybe someday," he said. "But first, we need to get you healthy." Over the following days, Tom began staying longer at the facility. He brought books Amy had recorded herself, reading, playing her voice through speakers so Kairos could hear it. The dragon seemed to understand that this small human child was precious beyond measure, and her innocent acceptance of its existence helped heal wounds that no medicine could touch. The breakthrough came on a Thursday. Tom arrived to find Kairos, waiting by the barrier, more alert and focused than ever before. The dragon's stance was different, less defensive and more hopeful. "Good morning, friend," Tom said, settling into his usual spot with his coffee. Kairos made a sound unlike any Tom had heard before. It started as the familiar purr, but shifted into something more complex, a melody without words that seemed to express everything the creature felt but couldn't say. Tom understood. It was a song of gratitude, a promise, a declaration of loyalty, not to an empire or emperor, but to the human who had seen past its broken exterior to the soul beneath. "I hear you," Tom said, reaching through the barrier to touch the dragon's snout. "I hear you, and I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, Director Vell arrived with news that made Tom's blood run cold. "The Emperor has summoned you," Vell said, his voice tight with worry. "He wants to see the dragon's progress for himself." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "And Tom?" Vell's 6 eyes met his with unusual intensity. The Emperor has not been in the same room as Kairos since the day it was brought here. Whatever happens, do not let the creature sense his pain. It nearly killed them both the last time. Tom looked through the observation window at Kairos, who was playing gently with one of Amy's toy spaceships that Tom had brought. The dragon had made so much progress, but tomorrow everything they had built together would be tested. He thought of Amy, counting on him to succeed. He thought of Kairos, who had learned to trust again after losing everything. And he thought of an emperor who was too afraid of his own grief to face the creature he had once loved. Tomorrow, all their broken pieces would be in the same room. Tom just hoped he could keep them from cutting each other to shreds. Emperor Maximus Aurelius arrived at the facility before dawn, bringing with him an entourage of guards and advisors that filled the observation deck. Tom had been expecting someone tall and imposing, but the Emperor was shorter than most humans, his body bearing the scars of countless battles. His left arm was mechanical from the elbow down, and a network of healing scars covered the visible parts of his neck and face. What struck Tom most was the Emperor's eyes. They held the same haunted quality he had seen in Kairos, the look of someone who had lost too much and was afraid to lose more. "So you are the human who thinks he can heal my dragon," the Emperor said. His voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. Every being in the room seemed to shrink back except for Tom, who stood his ground. "Your Majesty, I don't think I can heal Kairos. I think Kairos can heal himself, given the right support," the Emperor's advisors muttered among themselves at Tom's casual use of the dragon's name and his failure to show proper deference. But the Emperor raised his hand for silence, studying Tom with calculating eyes. "You speak of the creature as if it were a person, not a weapon." "With respect, sir, that's exactly what Kairos is, a person who happens to be shaped like a dragon." Through the observation window, they could see Kairos in its chamber. The dragon had sensed the Emperor's presence the moment he entered the building, and its behavior had changed dramatically. It paced restlessly, occasionally looking toward the observation deck even though it couldn't see through the one-way glass. "The creature is agitated," observed General Pike, the Emperor's military advisor. "Perhaps we should activate additional restraints." "No," Tom said firmly. "Kairos isn't dangerous right now. It's confused. It knows you're here, Your Majesty, and it doesn't understand why you won't come closer." The Emperor stepped closer to the window, and Kairos immediately moved to the side of its chamber nearest to him. The dragon pressed its head against the wall, making soft whimpering sounds that carried clearly through the speakers. "It remembers you," Tom continued. "Every day for the past month I've felt its thoughts through our psychic connection. It dreams about flying with you, fighting beside you, protecting you. It doesn't understand why you stopped visiting." "I stopped visiting because it tried to kill everyone who entered its chamber," the Emperor snapped. "Including me?" "No, sir. It tried to share its pain with everyone who entered its chamber. There's a difference." Tom moved to the control panel and began adjusting settings. Kairos wasn't attacking people with its psychic abilities. It was screaming for help the only way it knew how. When someone you love is hurting, you feel that hurt, too. The dragon was trying to make others understand what it was going through. The energy barrier around Kairos's chamber flickered and died. Alarms immediately began sounding and the guards reached for their weapons, but Tom was already walking toward the chamber entrance. "What are you doing?" the Emperor demanded. "Showing you something," Tom replied. He pressed his hand to the biometric scanner, and the heavy door began to slide open. Kairos bounded toward the entrance with surprising grace for such a large creature. But instead of attacking, it stopped just short of where Tom stood and lowered its massive head in greeting. Tom reached up and scratched behind the ridge where the dragon's ears would have been if it were human. "Hello, friend," Tom said softly. "I brought someone to see you." The dragon's head swiveled toward the observation window, and it made that musical sound that Tom had learned was its song of happiness. But underneath the joy, Tom felt a deep current of longing and confusion. "It wants to come to you," Tom called to the Emperor. "It needs to know you're okay." "Absolutely not," General Pike interjected. "The security risk is unacceptable." But the Emperor was already moving toward the stairs that led down to the chamber level. His guards followed, hands on their weapons, but he waved them back. "Stay here," he ordered. "If I die, it will be my own choice." Tom met the Emperor at the chamber entrance. Up close, he could see how much the man's injuries had cost him. His mechanical arm moved stiffly, and his breathing was labored from the short walk down the stairs. "It wasn't supposed to end like this," the Emperor said quietly. "Kairos was the finest war dragon in the fleet. Intelligent, loyal, fearless. It saved my life so many times I lost count." "It's still all of those things," Tom replied, "but now it needs you to save its life." The Emperor stepped into the chamber, and Kairos immediately approached. The dragon moved slowly, carefully, sensing the man's fear and physical limitations. When it reached the Emperor, it gently lowered its head until it was level with his chest. The Emperor's good hand trembled as he reached out to touch the dragon's scarred scales. The moment they made contact, both beings went rigid. Tom felt the psychic explosion through his connection with Kairos, a flood of shared memories, emotions, and pain that nearly knocked him unconscious. He saw flashes of their bond as it had been. The Emperor, as a younger man, laughing as Kairos, performed aerial acrobatics just for the joy of it. Battle scenes where they moved as one mind in two bodies, each protecting the other with instinctive precision. Quiet moments between campaigns when the Emperor would fall asleep leaning against the dragon's warm scales. And then the accident. The blast that had blinded Kairos and left the Emperor broken. The guilt, fear, and grief that had driven them apart when they needed each other most. "I'm sorry," the Emperor whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, old friend. I was afraid that seeing me would remind you of the battle, of the pain I caused you." Kairos made a sound unlike any Tom had heard before. It was almost like crying, but deeper, more complex. The dragon wrapped its neck around the Emperor in what could only be called an embrace, careful not to hurt him with its greater size and strength. The reunion was interrupted by klaxons blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, and Director Vell's voice echoed over the intercom system. "Security breach in sectors 7 through 12. Armed hostiles have infiltrated the building. All personnel evacuate immediately." Through the chambers reinforced windows, Tom could see explosions lighting up the corridor beyond. The rebel attack he had feared was finally happening, and they had chosen the worst possible moment. "The children's medical wing," the Emperor said, his tactical mind immediately assessing the situation. "The rebels know I visit the young patients. They're trying to use them as hostages." Tom thought of Amy, alone in her hospital bed on Earth, trusting him to come home safely. He thought of all the sick children in the medical wing who needed protection. "Kairos can help," he said. "It knows this building better than anyone, and its psychic abilities can track the attackers." The dragon was already moving, its body coiling, with renewed purpose. For the first time since its injury, Kairos looked like the war dragon it had once been. But there was something different now. A controlled precision that spoke of wisdom earned through suffering. "I won't ask you to fight. For me again," the Emperor said to the dragon. "You've given enough." Kairos nudged the Emperor gently, then looked at Tom. Through their psychic connection, Tom felt the dragon's determination. It wasn't fighting for the Empire or for glory. It was fighting to protect the innocent, to ensure that no other children would suffer as it had suffered. "We're not asking you to fight for the Empire," Tom said, understanding. "We're asking you to fight for family." The dragon's response was a roar that shook the walls of the chamber. But this wasn't the sound of pain and rage Tom had heard when he first arrived. This was the battle cry of a protector, a being who had found its purpose again. As alarms continued to wail and explosions grew closer, Tom realized that everything they had built together was about to be tested in the most dangerous way possible. But for the first time since he had taken this job, he wasn't afraid. Kairos was whole again, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, Tom stood in the garden behind the Imperial Medical Research Center, watching Amy chase holographic butterflies while Kairos followed her with the patient attention of a devoted guardian. The dragon moved carefully around the flower beds, its massive form somehow graceful among the delicate plants. The attack on the facility had ended quickly once Kairos joined the defense. The dragon's psychic abilities had allowed it to track the rebels through the building's maze of corridors, while its presence alone had been enough to make most of them surrender without a fight. The few who had chosen to resist found themselves facing a creature that combined the tactical brilliance of its war dragon training with the protective instincts of a being who had learned to value life above victory. No civilians had been harmed. The medical wing had been secured within minutes. And for the first time since its injury, Kairos had remembered what it felt like to be useful. Amy laughed as one of the holographic butterflies landed on her nose, its wings shimmering with colors that didn't exist in nature. She had arrived on Aurelia Prime 3 weeks ago, when the experimental treatments on Earth had finally failed, and Tom's insurance had approved the transfer to the Imperial facility. The change in her had been remarkable. The advanced medical technology of the Empire was decades ahead of anything available on Earth, but Tom suspected that Kairos' presence had contributed just as much to Amy's improvement. The dragon seemed to sense when she was having a difficult day, appearing beside her bed with a gentle rumble that somehow made the pain more bearable. "Daddy, look!" Amy called, pointing to where Kairos was delicately holding a real flower in its jaws, offering it to her with the same care it had once reserved for battle formations. "I see, sweetheart. What do you say?" "Thank you, Kairos," Amy said solemnly, accepting the flower and tucking it behind her ear. The dragon made its purring sound, and Tom felt the creature's contentment through their psychic bond. The Emperor had visited twice since the attack, each time staying a little longer. The guilt and grief that had driven him and Kairos apart were slowly healing, replaced by a mature understanding of what their bond could become. "The creature seems happy," Emperor Maximus had said during his last visit, watching Kairos help. A group of young patients build a snow fort in the medical center's recreational area. "I have not seen it play since before the war." Tom had nodded, remembering his own amazement the first time he saw the dragon engage in something purely for joy. "It took me a while to understand that Kairos needed a purpose beyond fighting. It needed to feel useful in a way that created life instead of destroying it." The Emperor's offer to restore Kairos to active military service had been declined, as Tom expected it would be. The dragon had communicated its choice clearly through their psychic connection. It wanted to stay here, among the children who needed healing, using its abilities to comfort rather than conquer. "Director Bradley," called Dr. Lisa Chen from the medical center's main building. Tom still felt a small thrill of pride when anyone used his new title. The promotion had come with the job offer, along with a salary that finally allowed him to stop worrying about Amy's medical bills. "Coming," Tom called back, giving Amy a quick kiss on the forehead. "Stay where Kairos can see you, okay?" "I will, Daddy. We're going to plant flowers for the new kids who are coming next week." Tom smiled and headed toward the building. The new wing was almost complete, designed specifically to house young patients from across the galaxy whose conditions required long-term treatment. Kairos would serve as both guardian and therapy companion, its psychic abilities helping to calm frightened children while its imposing presence ensured their safety. Inside the medical center, Tom found Dr. Chen reviewing treatment plans with the staff. The Zilarian doctor had initially been skeptical of including a dragon in their therapeutic protocols, but the results spoke for themselves. Patients who had been withdrawn and unresponsive began to show improvement within days of Kairos's arrival. The Williams family is asking about bringing their son next month, Dr. Chen said, consulting her tablet. 8 years old, suffering from Kroger's syndrome, similar to Amy's case but more advanced. What's his prognosis with treatment? Good. If we can get him to cooperate with the therapy regimen. He's been through 12 foster homes in the past. 2 years. Severe trust issues with authority figures. Tom nodded thoughtfully. Kairos might be exactly what he needs. Sometimes it's easier to trust someone who can't hurt you even if they wanted to. Through the window, he could see Amy and Kairos working together in the garden. The dragon was using its tail to dig small holes while Amy carefully placed seeds in each one. Other children from the medical center had joined them, some in wheelchairs, others connected to portable medical equipment. All of them were laughing. I have the quarterly report ready for the Emperor, Dr. Chen continued. Treatment success rates are up 40% since Kairos joined the staff. Patient satisfaction scores are the highest in the facility's history. And the dragon? Stress hormones at baseline levels. No episodes of destructive behavior. If I didn't know better, I'd say it was a completely different creature from the one described in the intake reports. Tom thought about those early days, when Kairos had been consumed by rage and grief. The transformation hadn't been quick or easy, but it had been real. Like Amy learning to walk again after her treatments, or Tom learning to be a father and provider at the same time, healing was a process that required patience and faith. His communication device chimed with an incoming call from Earth. Tom stepped into his office and activated the holographic display, revealing the face of Dr. Rodriguez from Amy's previous hospital. Tom, I wanted to check on Amy's progress. The reports we're receiving are almost too good to believe. She's doing incredibly well. The treatments here are more advanced than anything we had access to on Earth, and the environment is helping too. She's making friends, keeping up with her schoolwork, and yesterday she asked if we could get a pet dragon when we go back to visit Earth. Dr. Rodriguez laughed. I take it she's become attached to your facility's therapy animal? You could say that. Kairos has been, well, miraculous isn't too strong a word. The dragon seems to understand what she needs before she does. When Amy has nightmares, Kairos is there. When the treatments make her sick, Kairos stays by her bed until she feels better. And you? How are you adjusting to life off-world? Tom considered the question. 6 months ago, he had been a desperate man taking a job that terrified him because he had no other choice. Now he was the director of a revolutionary therapeutic program, living in a city among the stars, watching his daughter grow stronger, every day. Better than I ever imagined possible, he said honestly. I found something here I didn't know I was looking for. After ending the call, Tom returned to the garden. The afternoon sun was setting behind Aurelia Prime's twin moons, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Amy had fallen asleep against Kairos's side, exhausted from a full day of play. The dragon's breathing was slow and steady, its massive body providing a warm, safe haven for the small human child. Other children from the medical center had gathered around them, some reading books, others simply enjoying the peaceful presence of their unlikely guardian. Tom saw in their faces the same expression Amy had worn during her darkest days on Earth, hope mixed with determination, the look of young fighters who refused to give up. Director Vell approached Tom as he watched the scene. The alien administrator had become something like a friend over the past months, their shared concern for Kairos creating an unexpected bond. The Emperor has approved the expansion proposal, Vell said, funding for 3 additional therapy dragons and training programs for their handlers. That's wonderful news. Do you think we'll find other dragons who need this kind of purpose? The war created many casualties like Kairos, beings who lost their way when the fighting ended. Your methods have shown that healing is possible, even for the most damaged among us. Tom nodded, thinking about all the broken creatures and people he had encountered in his life. His wife, fighting a disease that couldn't be beaten. Amy, struggling with a condition that tried to steal her childhood. Kairos, drowning in grief and rage. Himself, lost and desperate after losing the most important person in his world. But healing was possible. It required patience, understanding, and the willingness to see past the surface damage to the soul beneath. Most importantly, it required love. Not the conditional love that depended on usefulness or perfection, but the stubborn, enduring love that refused to give up on someone, just because they were broken. As the stars began to appear in Aurelia Prime's darkening sky, Tom gently woke Amy and helped her say goodnight to Kairos. The dragon nuzzled her hair with its snout, a gesture so tender it made Tom's chest tight with emotion. "Will Kairos be here tomorrow?" Amy asked as Tom carried her toward their quarters in the residential section of the medical center. "Every day, sweetheart. For as long as you need." "Good," Amy said, already half asleep against his shoulder. "I told the other kids that dragons are the best friends you can have. They don't judge you for being sick, and they never get tired of protecting the people they love." Tom smiled, remembering his first day at the facility when he had thought Kairos was just a dangerous animal that needed to be controlled. Now he understood the truth that Amy had grasped immediately. The dragon wasn't a weapon or a tool or even a pet. It was family. And sometimes, family came in the most unexpected forms. As they walked through the corridors of the medical center, Tom could hear the soft sound of Kairos settling in for the night, positioning itself where it could keep watch over all the children under its care. The dragon that had once been the Emperor's most feared weapon had found a new purpose, one that created hope instead of destroying it. Tom thought about the future, about the other damaged beings they would help, about Amy growing up strong and healthy among the stars. There would be challenges ahead, setbacks and difficulties that would test everything they had built together. But they would face those challenges as a family. Human, dragon, and all the lost souls who found their way to this place where healing was possible and love was stronger than broken dreams. It was, Tom reflected, exactly the kind of impossible thing that happened when people refused to give up on each other. The kind of miracle that occurred when understanding was chosen over force, patience over anger, and hope over despair. In the end, that was what made humans special in a galaxy, full of stronger, faster, more advanced species. Not their technology or their weapons, but their stubborn refusal to abandon the broken and their infinite capacity to see potential where others saw only damage. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won on battlefields or in boardrooms, but in quiet moments when someone chose to stay when everyone else walked away. When someone saw family where others saw only monsters. When someone believed in healing when the rest of the galaxy had given up hope. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything.